Shlam bricha mititchon. I'm going to keep going and start something to add to our books because our books are mostly in the Sarta or Khattai or Western Ma'arwaya or Boyo handwriting style. So this one I'm going to be focusing on the Eastern, and I hope it helps those who don't know the Eastern to learn it, or those who know the Eastern also might find it useful because I am going to be doing it in the context that most of my introductory books, if not all of them, are primarily written in the Eastern script. So let's get going. Let's get the alphabet going. You've got Alep, and the important thing with Alep is, let's go back to its roots. The older version, called Estrangela, was like this. So it would lift from the line. Well, my chalk's not working. There we go. And then the other one would come in and intersect. If you do that, about rotating it maybe 30 degrees, so this lifting of the line right over here, we're going to do that straight. And we're going to do that same shape right here. So you see, the Eastern Alep is just like the Strangular Alep, which is why usually it's top, and I'm going to exaggerate it. It's flat, and it comes down, so when you're doing it, it comes out like, and let's erase that and hope this chalkboard works out better. And then the Western one, so let's do another Eastern Alep. Western one, it doesn't do that flat bottom line. It just starts up and down. So you always go up and down. So why sometimes you'll see it like this with a curve. And sometimes you'll see that top part a bit more obvious like that, or sometimes it'll be completely hidden. The Western style of writing usually is done with a narrower nib, or the bamboo reed is going to be cut sharper and it can actually hold more ink, whereas the Eastern one has more strokes in it and uses a thick nib. So if you look at a lot of Eastern manuscripts, they have a very thick and thin combination, with the Western one, they're usually a narrower and it comes off of a little bit more elegant, and the Eastern one comes off more bold. So I guess that's the word I would use. That the Western one's a bit thinner styled, elegant, and the Eastern one's a bit more bold. So there's your Alep, and then Beth. We would start from the bottom of the line, go up, and you have Beth. So you'd have 1 and 2. What's important is that there's parallelism here and here. Also true in the Western. So the Western Beth would be start on the middle line, and it would start about a third of the way from the far end of the top bar. So just watch it. I'm going to go here, I'm going to pull left, and then go right. And what that does is it makes a very parallel to the bottom line dash. So I make this dash right up here. It's a right to left dash, right to left dash. And that right to left dash makes sure that I'm parallel. Whereas with the Eastern one, I'm starting on that line, I have to make that dash parallel and then pull. What's important is that Beth cannot go this way. Cannot. This has to be parallel to this. This part right here has to be parallel to this. So Eastern Beth. And we're going to take a look and check out how the Western Beth and Cap can be distinguished. So here's a Western Beth with that right to left dash. Now I'm going to do a Western Cap. You notice that hook. it drops below parallel. So he cried has a beth, a cap, and an alep, bcha. And it's also the year we're in, as Dr. George Kiraz noted. 2020 may have been bad, but 2021 spells beth, cap, alep, bcha. He cried. So beth, cap, alep. Now let's go Eastern, because that's what I'm supposed to be teaching right now. Beth, cap, Alep. And if you want to really be old school, like before printing old school, you would discover yourself mixing this up a bit. But I would, at the outset, make sure that whichever script I'm learning by hand, my hand follows the Eastern rules I'm giving, or the Western rules that I'm giving or someone else gives, because I'm an Easterner, so I might screw one or two of them up, but I've tried to get it right. So, Yemen, we would start at the corner, and this is a full-size letter, so it goes all the way up. 1, 2, 3. So that's 1, 2, and 3. Yemen. 1, 2, 3. Now I've seen some Easterners do this, which is cool, and it's old school manuscript style, and that's exactly a Western one. The Western one is usually lower on the line, so you're just starting from the line, pulling down. And again, we're using in terms of Eastern, Western. They really have more to do with the nib you're using. If you ever mess around with old school reed and paper writing tools, you'll discover exactly why these letters are done this way. Gemel. So he chose. We're going to do a gemel, a beth, and a alap. Gua. He chose. And I'm going to put together an Eastern one. Gemel. 1, 2, 3. Beth. Alep. So let's clear that out. And Dalet. So let's go with the original Estrangela Dalet. Dalet. Let's do that from the bottom. Dalet. Let's do that kind of quick. Dalet. Let's do that kind of open. Dalet. Let's do that kind of closed. Dalet. Dalet. Well, you've got the Estrangela Dalets here. You've got the Eastern Dalet here. And you've got the Khattai or Sirta Western Dalet there. You see how that worked? So, for Eastern Dalet in the corner, which is where most things start, so it'll be 1, 2, 3. And for your Western, kind of like big comma. And you'll see manuscripts do this. This is Estrangela. Your Estrangela can be a little fancier. You can put what we call carne, horns on it. But you want your Dalet for Eastern. And now we can learn the first 4 letters as one word. Which is a cool little mnemonic that I think both traditions share. It's called Abgad, which is also a way of saying alphabet. So you have Alep, Beth, Gemel, and Dalet. And then it's Ab, put a hard dot here so we know that it's ab, and then gad. But after abgad, we're going to learn these letters: he, waw, and zin. So that's ha was. Abgad ha was. So that gives us our first 7 letters: abgad and ha was. It's an easy way to memorize the alphabet. And we're going to go through the whole alphabet with that. But let's clear that out and work on our ha was letters: he, waw, zin. So the Eastern he begins from the middle point down. Let's get that right there. And then from there we go straight out in parallel and turn back for the circle. So the most learned deacon, Shamasha Ishaya, of our local cathedral, he taught me the way he does letters, and it fits what I see in a lot of manuscripts. So that's how I make my letters. That one was a little bit too big. There. And you can also curve this if you want, stylistically. So there, he. Western he, instead of, here's the Eastern, that's 1. And then 2 goes. Western he is 1, 2. If there's someone Western, I've always wanted to know, do you do your circles like this or the other way around? Because we do the clockwise on the he. So like you see, that's clockwise on the top row. But here is, so this is our Eastern. This is our Western. So 1, 2. He. Let's go to waw, which I think everyone has waw the same. Although the Eastern follows the older manuscript style starting from the bottom, where the Western, I believe, starts from the top. Again, any Western watchers, please let me know. But the Easterners start here. The Westerners start on top. And then Zen. So Zen's one that actually can be a little difficult because you want to get this teardrop to it. And it helps if your chalk's helping you. There. You usually do not want it quite like that. But you want it emphasis on the rounded part rather than the tail. It's got that kind of almond shape to it. It's kind of like an almond with a wisp to it. Zen. So that's Eastern Zen. And again, an Eastern nib would be like a fat calligraphy nib. A Western one would be a thin calligraphy nib. An Eastern one would be something that would be even more than you would see for block letters. So it would be like that Arabic, in certain kinds of Arabic calligraphy that's very thick. It takes a lot of strokes of dipping your reed and then on paper. So that Zen is 1 stroke, which is a good amount of ink in it. Which is also what makes that Eastern script look so bold. But here, it's hollow because I'm using my fingertip, not using a really wide nib. You could imagine if you're using a nib that inside would be filled. So that's Eastern Zen. Western Zen, it's very similar to an Alep because it starts with a stroke upward and then down, so that you have right here a Western Alep and a Western Zen. Western Alep, Western Zen. So let's do the word Azil. Alep, Zen, and then Lamet, as they would do it. So now we have completed Ha, Let's do that again. Hawaz. So we had abgad, and Hawaz. So let's go to Khattai. So Khattai is khet, which we would start from bottom of the line. Apparently this is not liking those upstrokes that I do. There we go. Kh. Khet. The Western one usually is starting from the top. So the Eastern is starting from a downstroke, which gives it this section right here, whereas the Western one would start with the upstroke. So then there's no tail here. But I doubt that you would notice it. There's your khet, Western. Let's do an Eastern khet. Thet. So let's do an Eastern thet. It's 1, 2, 3. So that's 1. Oh, I'm sorry, I screwed that up. Overthinking it here. 1, 2, 3. So that's 1, 2, and then 3. Which is cool because your 1 gives you the size of that V shape at the bottom, because you're going to basically drop straight down from it and in the same stroke shoot up and meet. So you see that kind of frames your size of your thet, and then you connect. So you go 1, 2, and 3 can go as far as it wants. 1, 2, 3. And again, it's a thick reed, right? So you imagine using a reed, you're going 1, dip, 2, dip, 3, let's say you want to say tawa. Dip. Now let's do the Western one. The Western one starts from the top, which is something that in the Western script is done a lot more than the Eastern. And it's one quick version of a thet. So tawa could be done like this, and then beth, and then alep. Whereas that word tawa, meaning good, in Eastern script would be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. That alep, I exaggerated that top part. Let's do that alep better there. And then we've got yud. Yud. For some reason this doesn't pick up my backstroke that would go there, but that's one movement I'm doing. And just like with chet, how our chet was like this, and that little bit on the right, you won't see that in a lot of Western because they're just starting from top of the line. And you've got to use, so let's do an exaggerated height, almost like a noon, but there. And if you use a thick nib, you realize the amount of ink that's there, why that tail becomes important. So let's do the word, the mnemonic of Khattai. So Khat, Tat, Yud. Khati. Khati. Now we have Kalman. Cap, Lamet, Mim, Nun. We have Abmgad, Hawaz, Khati, Kalman. So Kalman is a cap, which Eastern cap starts at the bottom, but has to be curved. That's one, and then two. Western cap looks similar, except you notice this almost has a parallelism that could make it look like a Western beth. Now look at the Western cap. It starts from the top, but it does not start on the middle line. It does not start on the dotted line. It starts below it. It's almost, this would be very exaggerated for the move I'm doing, but it's got a touch of that. So the word kul, all, Western. Eastern cap, starting from the bottom, but it definitely does not look like a beth. A beth would look like this. My experience, usually beginners have easier time with the Eastern alphabet because of these letters. Cap. Beth, cap. Beth, cap. There's also the ending cap. I'll give the Eastern version. So that's one. Or it can be done, which again is the same. Sort of stroke. That's kind of by itself. This one, Lamed. So Eastern Lamed, like the Eastern Yemen, it starts from the bottom. One, two. Western starts from the top. They should look pretty much the same, except at the end. Eastern always ends like this, or in some, if you want to be fancy, you can kind of do something like that at the end. But that's not as common. Western usually will end, so let's do an actual Western. That was an Eastern, because it was bottom to top. It's got top to bottom for a Western. Western can sometimes, once you get to that bottom stroke, lift, or it can end that bottom stroke and pull a little bit up. So if we put cap lamet, the word for all, kul, Western, cap, lamet, and Eastern, cap, lamet. Now meme. So let's go back to the old Estrangela meme. The old Estrangela meme would come up from the line, kind of curve out like this, and then, so like the word from, min. Eastern meme is very close. Kind of variation on that old one. It's do that, and then you do this. One, two. So you're one, two. One, two. I have seen people do it like this. but that doesn't seem to be the one I see most in manuscripts. And Shamashi Ishaya taught me this one, and it is a awesome way of writing it. I would say that's the closest to a canonical meme for the Eastern, kind of today's Eastern script. And again, the thing that really recommends that is remember the old one. It's pretty much the same thing. It's 1, right? 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. The bottom part's like a yud. Top part's that. So 1, 2. And now we can go to final meme. End of a word, oftentimes meme will come out like this. Then you'll come over about halfway and strike it. One, 2. 1, 2. Western meme will be written from the bottom. Again, that's something very common with Western ways of writing, is to not always reference from the bottom line. So they will go 1, 2. 1, 2. Well, it's not, there's no 2, it's just 1, I guess. There, 1. 1. Thinner read, more ink on the read. Or more lines possible with that same amount of ink. In their final one, they'll go up and then strike down. So, I Easternized that. Starting in the middle. There's your Eastern, and here's your Western. So Western when you're in the middle of a word. So let's put meme lemet. Meme lemet. And Eastern. 1, 2. The noon. So Eastern noon, start at the top. And what that would be Western. Whoops. Noon for Eastern, bottom to top. Bottom to top. Bottom to top. Bottom to top. Usually you can put a little hook on it. And final noon is just you're taking your line and you're scratching your noon. So bottom to top for Eastern. And final. And final. And final. Now I should be putting a little bit of a note at the top of that, but basically think of it as giving if you're using a pin without putting any space in it, putting a line next to a line. So if it's like a 0.7 millimeter line that you're using, it would be like a 1.2 millimeter thick area, this part right here. So you're just going up and you might give it a little width there. The Western one, they just pull from the top. And it's a very flat line. You know, you can tell a Western noon from a yud because there's your noon, there's your yud, there's your lemed. So the mnemonic, cap, lemed, meme, noon. And the mnemonic is Kalman. Kalman. Let's do a Western one. Kalman. Next, 4 words, letters are sa-pas. So we have sumkat. So 1, 2. Again, we're rising from the line. And if we're connecting to the next word, so you would frame it and pull it. Frame it and pull it. The Western one would start again above that bottom line in one stroke. And now we get to I. So I or ain is that guttural ah sound, like ar-ah, mar-aitha, the you hear. And for ah, the Eastern goes up and across. And you can give it a little curve. You usually want to attach at the bottom. The Western is similar, usually straighter. So a noon would be like here, and the I would be here. Let's do Eastern bottom up. I. So if you want to say the word aina, aina. Pe, Eastern bottom up. 1, 2. Western, usually with a bit more curve. The Eastern can also be done 1, 2, 3. So you can do the Eastern one stroke. And probably the more correct would be the Western pe. And now we get the Sade, which is pronounced with, think of starting a word with T, like the word town, but don't do anything with your tongue when you think of T. Just get ready to say T right before you would make it. And now make an S. Ts, right? So it's not sa. It's not like saying sun. It's sa. That tongue goes up to the palate. So that's why sometimes it's a TS transliteration. I transliterate it with an S and a dot under it. So it's Sade. Just like you're about to pronounce a T, T with your tongue behind your upper teeth, touching your palate hard. Sade. Sade. So the Eastern, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. And yes, we kind of tend to make a slash at the end, kind of letting the pen go from a thicker to thinner line. And the Western is quite easy. It's just this curvy. So it's curving from left to right, coming down to a very slight curve. So Eastern, let's actually pay attention to these lines. So we've got top line, bottom line. Sade would be on the bottom line. So you make a chet, right? There's your chet. But except this time we're going to make a Sade. That last stroke is going to go down. 1, 2, and for the Western. Right? Both of them are pulling close to the line. They're both Yud Chet distance from the line. And the mnemonic is Sa, Pas, Simket, Ptacha, Ae, Sa. And because of that Ha coming up, there's a little bit of a Sa sound to that Simket. Pe, and Sade. Sa, Pas. Let's do the Western. Now we can do the letter Qop. So Qop is in the back. It's a Q sound. And this one goes up almost like it's a beth, but not so extreme. Come down and meet and come. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. My assumption, if you're doing Eastern, you're in for a bit of a slower writing style. That's why we call the Western, usually in Eastern we call it Khattai, the running style, because their Qop would be so it's 1. Well, how do you tell the difference between that and Waw? Well, because Qop connects, so it always has that element here. And Qop almost never is at the end of a word, so it almost always has a good reason to have a connection anyway. And I transliterate Qop the Q. Resh. Everything I said about Dalet is true in Resh, in the sense that there's your Eastern Resh, here's your old Estrangela Resh, and the Estrangela Resh, sometimes you'll see it like that, sometimes you'll see it like that, and then like that, and now we've gone full Western. They usually do it just a dot here. So Eastern, 1, 2, 3. Your Western, 1, 2. We had covered most of that on Dalet anyway. Sheen. So Sheen has a couple ways, but in the Eastern, what I would consider canonical would be that. 1, 2, 3. And most people, when they write, they let their pen go up a little bit on the corners, giving it qarne, giving it those horns. Let's see if we can do that nicely connected. One more time and give it a try. There we go. Sheen. You'll sometimes see this sheen in manuscripts. Don't do it. It just, unless you can do it really small like that, maybe in handwriting. But it's nice to see letters formed really clearly, and I don't really think it takes that much more time. And the Western sheen, if you think about how this was written, like I said, it was done often, so sometimes you'd even see manuscripts of sheen that's kind of like this. Well, if you think of, go from this to this to this, you can kind of see someone doing something like that, because it's got the most squiggles in it. It's got, right, this one has kind of like, I'm exaggerating those loops. So the Western one comes over and back, comes over and back. And if you're doing that with a bit of a calligraphic broad nib to it, it fills out, so that you'll usually see it look like a big filled in dot. So it's kind of like a triangle that's filled in. You'll see it look like that. But the way that's getting there is it's going up, down, and then back and through. And that's your Western sheen. Now we can go to Tao. Let's go to Strangular Tao. And you can see how that becomes the Eastern Tao. Up, down. And usually has a bit of a curve to it. So let's put some, say the word you, write the word you. At. So it's shorter than an Alep, taller than a Nun. In a Western Tao, very simple. From the top you come down, and see that Tao-ness of it is right there. It's that's the Tao. And like a lot of these, the Eastern, it starts at the line. So it starts at the line and starts at right and goes up and left. And the Western starts right and up and comes down. Sometimes you'll see ones that look like they're straight, but really they should have a little curve there, because it's still got that Tao-ness to it. That, right? That's this. And then the old ones would go like that. Sometimes you have ligature. You have a stuck togetherness of, or a kind of a way of writing a Tao and an Alep, because the feminine words end in Tao Alep often. So you could write Tao Alep like that. Western, Tao Alep. And Western usually will write it like that. Eastern has two ligatures. One is what looks kind of like a Western Tao, which you'll also see in a lot of books as a Tao. So Easterners have their Tao that's basically like the Western Tao written in an Eastern direction from the bottom. But you can do that, come up, loop around, and make your Alep. So you see that right there is your Alep. And right there is your Tao. So you made your Tao. And one of these Taos, but except instead of coming all the way to the line, kind of flew up and came down. It can be a very elegant Tao Alep. There's another Tao Alep that print usually I see it a lot, which is you're coming up to your line, you go up, you make a V in the middle of it. So the V's between here and here. Right? So you're coming and go up, make your V, and make an Alep. And I usually wouldn't put a tail in it. So you've got your Tao-ness like right there. That's your Tao. And then you've got your Alep. So it's on the line up, Tao Alep. On the line up, Tao Alep. So that's like if you want to say, come, te. Oh, let's do that other Tao Alep. There's your other Tao. And you can use this as a Tao, or you can stop a little bit above the line to make room for some elegance. And then your Western. So from the top, your old Estrangela, which comes into that kind of Tao, which becomes that kind of Tao, the Western Tao, the Tao Alep, and this Tao Alep. Oh, let me do that one nicely. So now we're ready to get the full mnemonic. We've got Alap-beth, Gamal, Dalat, Ab, Gad. He, Wow, Zain, Ha, was. Het, Tet, Yud. خاطي كاب لمد ميم نون كل من سمكت پ Sade Zapas قوب ريش شين تاو قر شاد أبجد هوز خطي كلمن صابس قرشت. That's an easy way to remember the alphabet. أبجد هوز خطي كلمن صابس قرشت. أبجد هوز خطي كلمن صابس قرشت. So I hope this is helpful and that it can explain some of the alphabet. Please, if there's any advice on something you want more focus on, or if you want me to speed up or slow down, leave it in the comments. Thank you very much. And Shikha Mbarak Lakum.